Ciao from Pietro, ciao from the limited edition, and ciao from the independents. As you know, for those of you that are familiar to this small broadcast, we try to bring the voices and the faces of the people we admire the most, the independent watchmakers that are animating, you know, our daily passion for mechanical watchmaking. Today is no exception. Today I'm going to have with our co-host Johnny from Ireland, our editor. We're going to have Albert from Zeitwinkel. Zeitwinkel is a brand, although the kind of terminology brand is probably not accurate, is an artisanal watchmaker that since 2006 have been championing the old methods of artisanal watchmaking combined with some of the most modern technologies, and we'll discuss details about this. But please, first, let me introduce you Albert in person, because I don't suppose you may have met him personally, if not in some exhibitions around the world, watch exhibitions around the world. And Johnny, of course, my co-host from Ireland. Gentlemen, how are you today?
Albert?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Pietro, for having me. Great to be here. I'm fine. Hoping for spring to really come through and watchmaking to continue as it is.
May God bless watchmaking. Johnny, we're still living extraordinary times, and how good it is to have the protagonists here at the Independents.
Absolutely. Well, I have to say, it's fantastic as ever to welcome Albert. It seems like an age, Pietro, since we did any kind of live content. So I think that was back in Geneva, and so it's fantastic to be doing another, getting back in the saddle, so to speak. But hey, my nerves were wrecked this day. I am frazzled. Albert sent images across to me, and there's such a huge file sizes that I couldn't find software that's getting them down. So I spent the whole day sweating here. All I have on me is the shirt. Yeah, right. Yeah, I knew that.
So, Albert, as a co-founder of Zeitwinkel, one of the main people, of course, still involved, you take pride of saying that the co-founders are still involved with the daily management of the operations, and that's a great thing, because it's going to be 20 years, tomorrow in 2026. Tell me, big exhibitions like Geneva are a bit dispersive for your concept of seeing watchmaking, aren't they? Is that the reason why we didn't see an official presence over there, starting from this that Johnny just mentioned?
Yeah, it's we used to do a Basel World thing starting in 2010 at the time, and at the moment, an exhibition that runs for 5 or 6 days is just too long for us. We're literally 3 people plus watchmakers. So we usually prefer these shorter events, 2 days, maximum 3 days. We'll be in Finland later this month, which is an excellent event. We'll be at some obscure event in Ireland later this year. Probably in New York at the Watch Time Show, which is also 3 days. And we're trying to get Dave from Garrick to finally put all his courage together and do a Watchmakers Club event in Geneva next year. So you have to help push him towards that. So 2 days
in Geneva,
okay.
In Geneva rather than
London.
Yeah.
Well,
in
addition to London, but they used to be the night before, and you, Pietro, remember that in Basel before Basel World. And I think for a small independent company like ours, or brand like ours, 5-6 days are not only very expensive, it's just too long. Meeting people in a very condensed scenario makes a lot of sense for us. And otherwise, we were in Geneva, we met lots of folks, probably didn't get enough sleep, which we compensated by some alcohol. Was not good. So I think 2 days would be.
And there's a lot of
better.
there's a lot of your view of watchmaking also in the way you approach these kind of events. I remember when we met at the Watch Pro Live event, for example, you really like spending time with each and every individual that actually approaches the counter to see your watches. And that has a lot to do with the fact that you have a very holistic approach to watchmaker. As watch passionate, you set up a watch brand. It wasn't a business idea, necessarily, strictly speaking, at the beginning. It was a way to actually enjoy what was your passion at the time. How did it happen in the first place?
Well, we were three people from very different backgrounds. So I come from a business and renewable energy background. Peter, one of the two other co-founders, he has been in the watch industry for quite some time on the sales side. And Max, the third one, he's a professor for arts and design. So we came together every once in a while and always had this idea to build an honest watch. And for us at the time, at least, there was a lot in the market that maybe didn't fit that description from our perspective. So we said we will start off with the movement. And that took us 3 years and a lot of setbacks and hiccups. Well, I don't know if you can really see this, but that's our automatic base movement. Lots of reflections here, but with a date, central, decentral, second configuration, German silver plates and bridges, 72 hours power reserve. And that took us about 3 years. And at the end of these 3 years, we probably knew more about watchmaking than any other non-watchmaker we ever ran across.
And that's Albert. And I would like to involve Johnny in this, because it's very rare to find a philosophy being born from rather the design of the mechanics rather than the design and the aesthetics of the watch itself. With Zeitwinkel, we have this kind of approach, Johnny, that is quite clearly portrayed by how the watches today look like, and we'll linger a little bit more in details around this. But this is a very interesting starting point, Johnny.
Yeah, it's Zeitwinkel, or to me, well, the name means time angle, doesn't it? I think, Albert.
Yep.
And so it is very distinctive, immediately recognizable. They're contemporary. They have their own style. The dial decorations that you do with the repeating motif, etc., that we see on some. I'm just trying to see if I can find one here.
Because we're gonna share some of the imagery that Johnny has prepared with Albert, and thanks for that. This is what the YouTube platform allows compared to Instagram. You can have a quiet conversation also by looking at some watches, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Well, I don't actually see the motif, the one with the motif. Although, is it on the Chrono Tempus version? It's actually
yes, on the outer edge, on the what appears white here. Yeah, there you see our logo.
I knew I had seen it earlier. But sorry, so I have deviated away from where I was talking. The brand is a very distinctive design language. It's something that is it's very clean, minimal, and just extremely exclusive and individual. And as I say,
as a consequence of this, would you say that the movement is the protagonist, Albert, or did you come to an understanding and a full satisfaction on the design that you have developed as well? And how do you think they interact together these days?
Well, the movement is definitely the protagonist. We didn't even know what the watches would look like until we had the movements ready. So we didn't do the design fully in parallel. We, of course, had an idea, especially with regards to our large date movement, how the aesthetics would have to work. which is a function of the position of the axes versus the date. But we only started truly developing the design of the watches after we were well into the development of the movement. And I would think the movement, it's fair to say the movement is the protagonist in almost everything we do. Whether it's a case design, whether it's production, whether it's the question whether or not to come out with a new model, it's always around the movement.
Yeah.
What is today you have two calibers that are in-house developed and that allow you a certain number of functions, of course, and then a certain numbers of aesthetics that you have worked based on the mechanics. Where is this are these the main pillar for the present and for the future, or are you working as well on new movements?
Well, we're looking into options. However, you have to keep in mind we're a very small company. We every time we look at modifying the movements, it means we cannot build watches. When customers have to wait a certain time for watches, at the moment it's around 4 months. Taking one watchmaker out to play with a design for a plate for something that might or might not come up one day, that takes away from building watches. So it actually is in-house that we think about new calibers, new modifications. But on the other hand, we build so few watches that we cannot constantly come up with something new when we cannot keep up with what we're currently doing. And we don't want to get into a position where we close order books or we run into some sort of hype because we follow the latest fashion. We wouldn't be able to anyways.
Yeah, so the two, the ZW0102 and 0103 are the workhorses. You have basically established the brand, and they give you a number of options. We've seen in many of your collections, you are now proposing, from the simple time and date execution to big date, which, if I'm not wrong, is patented as well. The power reserve indication, and so the two calibers you have at your disposal, they give you a certain number of options on which to build at the moment.
Yes, and we actually start with just a minute and hour hand configuration. And what you see here is probably the most complex, with the power reserve at the 1 or 2 position, depending on your perspective, the patented large date mechanism at the 11 position, and the very large small seconds, obviously at the 6th position.
Yeah. I'm sorry, guys. I actually thought I had images of the movement uploaded. They haven't followed up, so apologies for that. So
no, that's great. We've seen in the closeout that you just put there before also the level of decoration, Albert, that is paramount to you, because of course when the movement becomes the protagonist, then the way you choose the raw materials for the movements, all the components, and the way you finish it, then it becomes your signature.
Yeah, Johnny, did you break this one?
I broke it. Yeah.
Terrible. You shouldn't. No, so that was one of the from the beginning, one of the factors we wanted to incorporate, that we not only have untreated German silver, which is very hard, very solid, but also very unforgiving if you make any mistakes. Because we don't treat it after decoration and after handling, you see every fingerprint forever. If you don't clean it right away, you see any scratches, any part where the watchmaker wasn't very diligent. But we wanted it that way, and it ages very nicely. It just takes on an even warmer glow 10 years in or 12 years in.
So no plating, no rhodium plating.
No plating on any of the my Shore or German silver plates and bridges. And we decorate even in places where you will never see it. So we polish, we do anglage, perlage, all of these things, most of it in-house. And so when you come to the workshop in Saint-Imier, we had a group there last week, and I always tell them it will be extremely boring because we don't have a lot of action going on. Last week we had 2 of our watchmakers sitting there just diamond polishing small parts, and it's like meditation. You just sit there and watch them polish small parts, and nobody will ever see that part, very likely. Even though all of our watches have a sapphire crystal backside, you will not see it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And here we go, Johnny. It's 3 German gentlemen setting up a watch brand using German silver, and yet being based in the Jura Mountains in Switzerland. So where is the where is the catch?
Yeah, we even have a 3/4 plate to make it matters worse.
Oh yeah.
If you would forgive Pietro, I do have some images here, but there's some other logo on them there that was used in the past. So we do have some images of
it's all about metal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't mind. In the metal is like our sibling, our brother. It's a privilege. It's a privilege. So Johnny, the German watchmaking is blooming, as we've seen it across the years. Each gentleman have chosen a different pattern to be based in Switzerland and to leverage on the infinite, incredible patrimony and ecosystem that the Swiss watchmaking can give. What's your take? And then we'll ask Albert what was the fundamental decision that was made at the time, and why now they are really happy as they are to be based in those fantastic premises in Saint-Imier, Switzerland.
It looks amazing. It is an incredible achievement to have come, as Albert said at the top, to have come from 3 so diverse schools of speciality, of specialism, and to have come together, to brought their creative energy together to create this wonderful brand, and not only a brand but its own identity as well, and to remain so true to the philosophy of just manufacturing in-house manufactured timepieces, creating the level of work and investment that goes into creating your movements, Albert, is it is daunting. It is certainly not for the faint-hearted. And I think that the way that Zeitwinkel have gone about it over the last, 15, 16 years now, and slowly building and building and building. And it's kind of an organic growth. And the word gets out little by little, as our friend Jizzy Ninja said a few minutes ago, that he'd never heard about the brand before. So it's all word of mouth, and doing these appearances and doing, as you say, the little shows, going to Helsinki or the other countries that you're going to, including I'm honoured and delighted to say that you're coming back to Ireland to make sure that last year wasn't just a fluke, and that we're able to do something special again. But it's putting feet on the ground, basically.
It's I think it's one of the major disadvantages if you don't take shortcuts and you don't believe in hiring actors or athletes to tell everybody that this week they really like our brand. We don't have the budget. It's just, if you spend an hour polishing a watch part instead of just getting it from Far Eastern Switzerland, it's very difficult to come up with a budget to hire a famous actor or to fly journalists business class to wherever to wine and dine them. And I'm not saying that is wrong, but it's just not the approach we're taking. So it takes us a lot longer to get known, unfortunately.
That's why I say it's a very honest and organic growth, I think. And
we will talk about the concept of honest watches. I just wanted to complete this reflection on the on the fact that yes, today German watchmaking is established and it's happening in so many ways. In 2006, probably it wasn't as offering the ecosystem that is offering today. When did it come the decision for you to move to Switzerland, or to do in Switzerland what you're doing, like I'm doing in the UK, what I could have not done in Italy, 10 years ago? I'm curious also from the entrepreneurial perspective.
Well, very often it's more a gut feeling than a very rational decision. But in this case, it was fairly clear that we could not build an honest movement in Germany. And there are basically two areas. One is the greater Black Forest area with Pforzheim and some other places in the Black Forest. And the other one is obviously Glashütte. And at the time, it would have been super difficult to build a movement without the majority of the design and probably the parts being made in Switzerland. So it was clear from nearly the beginning that we had to move to Switzerland. And that's where the gut feeling comes in, because we looked at everything from Schaffhausen down to Geneva, quickly decided we don't want any glass facades or anything very representative. And in the end, we followed the smell of oil, right? We wanted to be where the artisans are, where you have all the people that work with you in a short distance, where you maybe drive for an hour or 50 kilometers through the hills. You get to that farmhouse where they can make that one part, or you which we actually do quite often. In Saint-Imier, we walk to suppliers, to partners, where they make one thing for us and they make it very well. And we wouldn't have been able to do that in Germany. We still brought some, I would say, German design language into the movements and into the watches, but it's a Swiss watch.
Absolutely.
It's actually really interesting to hear that you're still working with these artisans, as you said. Maybe they're in a little farmhouse on a quiet road outside town or something like that, and yet they are specializing in one component or one type of finishing or whatever it might be. I love your expression. We follow the smell of the oil. For the watchmaker's atelier, I assume that's what you're...
That's what it is. If you walk in, we have two wings, as you saw in the... we have one level of this building and two wings there. Yeah. And one side to the right is where the watchmakers are, and where at maximum you get a glass of water and a cookie if you visit us. And you get to see some watches probably. And on the left side, we have the machines, and many of these machines are quite old and traditional. And if you work on metal, you smell oil. That's just the way it is. Okay, the red thing in the background, that's a little more modern. Okay, but we also have very old machines that are excellent at doing one specific thing.
Yeah. So what's is then the concept of the honest watch that make you find the right balance between marrying those old methods, old tools, old components with the modern machinery that can help you, how can I say, maximizing efficiency and in the end the quality of the product?
Well, it's not only about efficiency. We do a lot of stupid things from an economic standpoint. That we shouldn't really do.
Welcome to the club.
No, but I think that's what it's about. You don't buy a watch if you want to know the time. Your iPhone will do the trick. You're buying a piece of lifetime of an artisan, of a watchmaker. That's what it is. And we would never say we do a plate by hand. We don't make that. You will never be as precise as a CNC machine, but on some things you see a difference, whether it's in a positive difference, whether it's done by hand or done by a machine, and very often we do it by hand then, or with a very old machine that then does it the traditional way, and we don't take shortcuts. So when we do a pelage, it's not 3 big circles, it might be 20 small ones.
Yeah, I did. I was reading your interview that I pointed out the fact that there is a trend in perlage in reducing the number of circles in order to space them a little bit more on the surface, in order to make the whole process less time consuming. You don't agree with these shortcuts, do you?
Well, we understand these shortcuts, especially if you are part of a larger group of companies and you have to constantly improve results because you have anonymous shareholders. But we don't have anonymous shareholders. So we obviously go with the times. If there's a new way or better way to do things that leads to a better result for the customer, we look at that. But we will not take a shortcut because we have a quarterly report that requires from our brand to cut expenses by 3% year on year.
Yeah.
That just doesn't make sense for us.
And there are another thing that I find interesting when I think about Zeitwinkel. There are levels of personalization, but not in the understanding of personalization from necessarily the number of options that you give to clients, but the fact that the watches are very personal. They are made by humans, and most of the times watchmakers that would spend a lot of time on one single watch. So you don't work as a production chain as we all imagine it. How important is that, Zeitwinkels?
Well, it's first of all, it would be quite silly to set up a production chain with 3 watchmakers. It wouldn't go anywhere. But of course, we try to work in batches to a certain extent. So what you see here, for example, is the production of special steel hands that are filed and shaped by hand and blued over a flame. And it takes between a day and 2 days to make a set of these hands, minute and hour hand. So while we're at it, we might make 1 pair in addition to what is required for the current order. However, what many people don't really see and are surprised to see when they visit us in Saint-Imier is that the pyramid of our type of watchmaking is at the base the preparation of the components. And that takes most of the work. And then comes assembly of the movement, then comes testing and optimization. Then you assemble at the tip the watch, and at the very tip it's just anything that comes after that. But just preparing the components where a pinion is assembled, or let's say the large date mechanism of our model 273 degrees is assembled, that takes a lot of time. And that's the majority of the work we do in Saint-Imier.
Johnny, do you have a favorite within the Zeitwinkel collection?
I loved the recent Chronotempest collaboration, although you could argue that is not pure undistilled Zeitwinkel. But the Chronotempest, yes, indeed, Albert.
Yep, I'm sorry, I was too slow.
This was a fabulous piece that we were fortunate to see in person last year in Waterford, and a lovely piece. Again, a combination of styles, really. The Zeitwinkel DNA there in the dial, as we mentioned earlier on, with the logo ubiquitous right around the periphery of the dial. For me, what is possibly the most iconic of the Zeitwinkel would be the sapphire blue, the 273 sapphire blue. I think that was the one that, or that family, the large date with the power reserve, the small seconds, and just the layout, the configuration of that dial, and it really, that's the one that really jumps out at me. And I think we have a couple of others of similar style with the let me see if I have, there's a 273 with enamel dial, I believe. Or
No,
silver
that's a galvanic silver, but the hands are also handmade on this one and then blued. And we hate doing that, but from time to time, you can talk us into doing it.
And how
No,
were you persuaded to do that now?
No, there's a lot that can go wrong. So the tips might break off when you make them, or the worst case is really you have beautiful hands, everything's finished, you blue them, and then you find impurities in the steel that only show after the bluing, and you can basically not use the hand, which is quite annoying.
And you're saying 2 or 3 days process to manufacture the hands?
Yeah, about 2 days, because it's a lot of manual labor, and again, you cannot really take shortcuts once you started filing away.
Yeah, no. So that's for me. Pietro, what about you? What stands out to you? Maybe it's the same collection, is it? The same family?
But I'm a big lover of the minimalistic 188 degrees. The blue, for example, is a piece that I really like.
Yeah.
But then this was at the beginning there when I saw for real the 273 degrees sapphire. I was also mesmerized because it remains minimalistic, but it has a lot of indications and functions, and at the same time a very, very clever view on the movement from the frontal see-through, which I find subtle and very well engineered, and the result is really, really good. I also find very clever the fact that most, you'll tell me if it's all of them, Albert, but most of the collections are available in either 39 or 42.5 millimeters, which I think is a great option to give these days to customers. And finally, Johnny and I, we spend a lot of time talking about how difficult it is to give real value below the threshold of 10,000 Swiss francs, especially when we're talking about in-house making. And I want to ask you, was that when you talk about an honest watch, is an honest watch also the reflection of the actual value for the money that you put on the table?
Yes and no, because it would mean that many others are building dishonest watches because they are more expensive, which is certainly not the case. And the threshold of 10,000 is an artificial threshold. It's just a number, and we will probably not be able to keep that for much longer because it seems that the Swiss like inflation. Let's leave it at that. But yeah, I mean, we cannot, as a small brand that is not okay. That looks upside down, but it is upside down because this is one of our best models. It's Peter, and he's holding it to his belly, I think.
It was the image that you sent me. I'll just run through a few of these images that.
The point is as a small brand, we cannot charge for that brand. So if you're a well-known brand that is aspirational, that where the buyer thinks they will improve their image by owning that brand, you can charge for that. We don't do that. It's just not, it wouldn't even be possible. So we try to give the owners a very, very fair price. And very often we have enough trouble to explain why our watches are more expensive than, for example, a Rolex.
Yeah,
but it's the economy of scale too, surely, Albert, and and also the running costs of your atelier. Every business is unique in what it costs to operate, and I would imagine that Zeitwinkel is run on a very, very tightly monitored budget. And that everything is literally accounted down to the penny. There's no, as you say, no glass frontage or these big welcoming reception areas or anything like that. Or I use the word again, organic, because it's all about the watchmaking and not about the show, not about the
And probably our guest is a bit too humble to actually accept that from our perspective, we we are lucky to represent a number of watchmakers, and there are watchmakers that are incredibly positioned in terms of the value that they can offer for the price. And I think that Zeitwinkel definitely is in that category, with brands like, from my perspective, Garrick, Kruger, Armin, Strom, Trilob. They all make an effort to offer real, as real as possible, as tangible as possible value for the price they promote themselves for, or don't promote themselves.
And we're not playing with other people's money. I think that's the one big difference. We have a lot of responsibility towards our watchmakers and towards the customers. You mentioned Garrick. You can call Dave from Garrick Watches at 11 in the evening, and he will gladly answer your questions. And I think that's one of the big differences in really owning what you do and seeing it as a job. So we cannot spend other people's money, so we have to build a good product that people like for the product.
So I would venture to say then, weighing up what we've been speaking about for the last few minutes, sir, that in actual fact, what Zeitwinkel isn't just good value for money, but it is exceptional, because you're not adding on figures that you could add on. That if it was a bigger brand, or a brand with a different philosophy or mindset, or maybe a little bit hungrier, that you'd be paying a lot more for the equivalent of the Zeitwinkel, the 273 or the 188 or the 082. You'd be paying a lot more for that if it was coming from a different brand. But there is that kind of, and I get that from knowing you, from meeting you. This is something genuine, and you can tell. I would say I'm a reasonable judge of character, and you kind of you instill that confidence in some, and that's just being honest with you. That's what I see. There's no bullshit with Zeitwinkel. It's very transparent, like your sapphire dials.
Oh, thank you. But Johnny, I will buy you a beer in Ireland, definitely now.
And I owe you dinner as well, Albert. So that will call for a night out altogether. Another element I read in one of your interviews, Albert, as well. You said something on the line of you don't necessarily agree with the Asian naturalization, I think you called it, of a certain way of interpreting watchmaking. Why is that important? I know that you are well beyond the idea of judging others for sourcing components in Asia or in other parts of the world. But what's the fundamental idea behind? Is it the attachment you have for the Swiss made, or again, does it come to the concept of building honest watches for the price we are asking?
So I'm not even Swiss, as you know, and you make enough fun of me for that. But I'm all for building a watch with, let's say, Asian components if you do it transparently. I believe if you build a watch in fairly small numbers at below 1,000 Swiss francs, it's quite difficult not to do it. And if you're transparent about it, great. Very often it's only possible to express your designs, express your creativity when you have somebody who's very flexible, who's used to doing large numbers quickly. You might have to throw 20% away, but you can use the rest, and it's still much cheaper than if it was made in Switzerland. And the Swiss are very often not all that flexible and quick, and it can be that you wait for a year until you get a component. My problem is that if you claim you have a Swiss-made watch, and then you actually don't. And as you know, it's, I think, 60% that has to be done in Switzerland, which very often is
60% of the cost of what is done in Switzerland, which of course,
so you have a component that is 5 Swiss francs when you buy it, and a watchmaker takes it out, looks at it from this side, looks at it from that side, which is already 6 francs, and voila, here you go. which is, of course, an exaggeration. But I think it is fair to, because you're buying a product that you don't really need, you're buying from many brands, you're buying a piece of art, you're buying a very creative product, you're buying something you want to identify with. And there's a watch for everybody, right? Yeah. So if you're okay with having a watch that is made in China and that's a nice little gimmick and it costs you, I don't know, 350 Swiss francs and you're happy with it, perfect. That's what you bought. But if you buy the same watch that you could make for 2,000 retail, you buy that for 10,000 because somebody says it's Swiss made and likes to be photographed with actresses.
Yeah,
maybe not so honest.
Absolutely. Very, very interesting. And I always appreciate your openness, Albert, because these are the real, I would say, topics that our collectors really want to hear about from a fresh perspective, and of course as honest as possible. Can't believe that we have already basically run out of time. It's been 45 minutes of intense chatting about our passion for watchmaking.
We're trying to get images.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Johnny, for that effort. Thank you, Albert, for your time. So what's next?
Thank you very much.
Zeitwinkel will see you in. People will be able to see you in Finland if they are there for any reason. Is that correct?
Well, if the watch show Finland is reason enough to be there. No, seriously, it's a very nice event, very intimate. Lots of founders there. You can really talk watches. It's not quite like Ireland in Waterford in September. Little different, but also very nice. So you will see us around. We will travel a lot this year. We might bring out 1 or 2 new variations of our watches. And you can also see us.
Would you like to remind the dates of the Finnish show?
That means I have to look it up first, but
yeah, we can put it in the comments. We can put it in the comments.
No, it'll be in 2 weeks, I think. It's actually next weekend, 12th and 13th of May.
Fantastic. So good luck
Johnny,
with that.
when is Waterford, Johnny?
Waterford is taking place this year. I can officially say on between the 22nd and 24th of September when it's open to the public. And so we'll maybe see you a day before and to get everybody set up. But yeah, really looking forward to it. It's we've got a really, really interesting lineup of exhibitors and celebrating artisanal independent watchmaking. And it's such a high. It's been extremely busy for me over the last couple of weeks, just trying to get people to say yes, we've booked our hotel, because we need to make sure everybody has a roof over their heads. And so
it will be fantastic. I'm absolutely sure, and so much looking forward to it.
It's going to be good. And there's a couple of lovely little things happening around it as well. And there'll be and there's an auction that's going to be run as well alongside it. And there'll be a couple of different events. And if we can find a man with a fiddle and another man with a set of pipes, we might get a bit of Irish music at one point along in the event as well. So just to give it that identity. But I'm really looking forward to it. You mentioned, Albert, just before we let you go, a couple of new pieces perhaps to be unveiled later on this year. Can you give us any teasers or any hints of what we might expect?
Well, it's been dragging on, so I will let you know once we're done, in order not to promise anything to be ready at a certain point in time. But as always, it's gradual for us. We don't bring out new models just because a certain date has passed or is coming up.
Not like Elon.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time. This was
Thank you.
This was the Independence, the limited edition broadcast today with Albert Edelmann from Zeitwinkel, independent watchmakers based in Saint-Imier in the Jura Mountains. And thank you to my co-host, Johnny McElleron, the editor of the limited edition as well. We'll keep bringing the protagonists of this fantastic world of independent watchmaking in the future. Thank you, gents, and see you very soon.
Thank you very much. Take
Very
care.
good.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.